And we can now turn to Jonathan Lis. He is a journalist and political commentator. Welcome to the program, Jonathan.
Hello.
Hi there. So, we just saw that unfurl, the vote coming in, 211 voting, saying they are confident indeed in Boris Johnson. What do these numbers tell us about Boris Johnson's one standing within his party? And really, can you just give us your impressions of how it's all shaken out?
Well, briefly, it's a disaster for him. This is 41% of his party, a party that won a landslide election victory 2.5 years ago. 41% of that party has voted to remove him. That is a staggering fall from grace for a prime minister who had all the authority and luck and opportunities in the world and squandered it. Anything over a third would have been a total disaster. And it has to be remembered as well that his predecessor, Theresa May, when she faced a confidence vote in 2018, she won 37, there were 37% of the party that voted against her, and she was gone 6 months later. So I don't think that Johnson is going to be able to survive this, because it shows that he has no authority in his own party. How can you lead your party to a general election when 40% of them, over 40%, have said that they don't think you're fit to be Prime Minister? You can't take that message to an electorate. And that's why I think this story is just beginning. I don't think that he now has the credibility to lead the party for anything longer than a few months. That's
very interesting. But it doesn't Prime Minister Johnson have that reputation of really just kind of like fighting tooth and nail? You know, I don't think he's just going to go away so easily, would he?
No, he's not going to go away of his own accord. But the problem is that the only thing he ever had going for him was that he was a winner. He was a proven winner. People wanted to support him. They didn't support him for his beliefs or his ideology. They supported him for what he could bring as an electoral asset, which was victory. The Conservatives now have not been ahead in a poll since December. That's a very long time, and the public is overwhelmingly hostile to Boris Johnson. He was booed over the weekend at the Queen's Jubilee. So if Johnson has shown that he doesn't have the one thing that he was voted to bring, there's no reason for the Conservative Party to keep him. The only reason that they kept him tonight was that there was no credible alternative. And that is also an indictment to the Conservative Party, because if there's no one better than Boris Johnson, it means that the Conservative Party isn't very good either.
I'm glad you brought up the subject of an alternative. Why is that? Why is there no clear successor to Boris Johnson?
Well, there was a clear successor a few months ago, until a few months ago, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, who had all the assets that you might need to be Prime Minister. You know, very telegenic, talented, clever, a good communicator. And he sabotaged himself by a series of unforced errors, such as his wife's non-dom tax status, his immense wealth, his fine for breaking COVID lockdown like Boris Johnson received. So he has gone way down. His political career is effectively over. And after that, there is really no one who has the charisma, the firepower, the strength, the intelligence to lead the party, certainly to an election victory. So that is a real problem for the Conservative Party. The other problems are that even if Boris Johnson were to go, they would still be very tainted and damaged by the Partygate scandal, and they're still facing a cost of living crisis, which is affecting millions of people in this country. And if they don't have an answer to that, they're not going to win an election, no matter who is in charge. So Boris Johnson staying is the best result for the opposition and the worst result for the Conservative Party. But even if he goes, their problems are just starting.
Really interesting. You just brought up Partygate. I'm just trying to figure out, in his letter to his party just this morning, Prime Minister Johnson said that he called Partygate just a media obsession and not a priority of the voters. And yet, as you brought up, he was roundly booed when he had appeared at St. Paul's Cathedral. How has Partygate affected the mood of the country? Does Boris Johnson still have the support of the people?
No, he absolutely doesn't. And no matter what he says, Partygate has cut through like very few issues have in the last 20 years, I would say. People are very, very angry about it. The majority of the British public think that Boris Johnson should resign, and that means the Conservative MPs are now completely at odds with the British public. And it's not for Boris Johnson to say what the British public's priorities are. He might well argue that a priority of the public is to be governed by someone they actually like, respect and trust. Boris Johnson is not that person, and that is why it's so damaging. The longer he stays, the further he will drag his party down with him, and the more he will associate the Conservative Party with his own scandal.
So as we look forward, how can the Labour Party and all the other parties in opposition, use this confidence vote to their advantage?
Well, the greatest advantage for the Labour Party is that Boris Johnson is there because he can suck up. He becomes a figurehead for the opprobrium. And so the Labour can point to him and say, he's still there, he's still unpopular. The Conservative Party, as I say, sort of get dragged further down with every day that he remains in office. It becomes more difficult if he leaves, because then there'll be a new face who won't be tainted by Partygate to the same extent, although they'll still have the problems that I mentioned earlier. But for the moment, it's very useful for the opposition to have Boris Johnson there because he is their greatest asset.
So, are Boris Johnson's days numbered? I mean, you brought up earlier Theresa May, who survived her confidence vote and yet, resigned. And history shows us, I believe Margaret Thatcher was in the same position. So, yeah, how long will we see him in Downing Street?
Well, I think Margaret Thatcher only survived a few days, actually, so I think he'll probably go longer than that. But really, we're dealing with a lame duck now. He has no authority. And he has no power. He can't sort of have the authority, the credibility that a prime minister needs to drive through their agenda. And so I suspect that he'll limp on for a few months. There are going to be 2 by-elections where the Conservative Party is defending 2 seats. It's likely to lose both of those seats. That will increase the pressure on him. He might go on a few months, but I can't see him lasting a full year. And I certainly can't see him leading the party to a general election. So the Conservatives have a rule that says he is now safe for a year, but they can change that rule as well if things are going really badly. So if I were Boris Johnson, I wouldn't be getting too comfortable, and I certainly don't think he's going to lead his party to an election.
Jonathan Lis is a journalist and political commentator. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your insight.